hydrotherapy and the healing effects of water on the body. Imagine a moment when you are standing barefoot on wet sand and the first wave washes over your feet, cold, alive, as if awakening something ancient in the body that has been slumbering in us since the first organisms emerged from the ocean onto land. And since then, water has remained inside us, in our cells, in our blood vessels, in our tears and in sweat, and even in the very moment when you are listening to these words now, your body consists of about 65% water, and everything you feel, think, and experience happens in an environment created specifically by it. And yet, we still do not fully understand exactly how water can heal, soothe, activate, and restore. How it, simple and transparent, is capable of becoming a powerful medicine available to everyone, regardless of age, gender, geographic latitude, or material wealth. And today, we will set off on an amazing journey, not to distant countries, not to abandoned laboratories or closed clinics of the elite, but inside ourselves, to the origins, to the very first steps of humanity in realizing the healing power of water, to those places where hot springs gush from under the ground like the pulse of the planet, to those cultures that built entire philosophies around water procedures, and to modern scientific discoveries that finally explain why ancient medicine men, monks, warriors, and healers from ancient Egypt to Japan, from Rome to Siberia, invariably turned to water not only as a means of cleansing the body, but as a tool for transforming the spirit. And perhaps it is right now, in an era of stress, digital saturation, and alienation from one's own body, that hydrotherapy is returning not as a fashion trend, but as a vital necessity, as a bridge between the technologies of the 21st century and the wisdom accumulated over tens of millennia. And if you think that all there is to this topic is just a warm bath with essential oils, then prepare to be surprised, because we will talk about how an icy shower can activate longevity genes, how contrast procedures restructure the nervous system, how mineral water from underground veins can fight inflammation better than some medications, and why today leading neuroscientists, cardiologists, and immunologists increasingly recommend to their patients not only pills, but also water rituals thought out to the smallest detail in terms of temperature, duration, rhythm, and jet pressure. And you will learn how to use water correctly, not just to relax, but to restart metabolism, reduce anxiety levels, strengthen immunity, and even improve sleep quality without a single extra pill, without expensive gadgets, simply using what humanity has had from the very beginning and what continues to flow like a fountain, in rocks, in rivers, in springs, and most importantly, in each of us. If we look back through the centuries, the first mentions of the healing properties of water are found as far back as the cuneiform tablets of the Sumerians, who, living in the valley between the Tigris and Euphrates, built special pools for purification rites. And not just for the sake of religion, their medical texts clearly state that certain diseases of the skin, stomach, and joints yield to treatment specifically through immersion in water of a certain temperature and composition. It is interesting that in those times, a distinction was already made between fresh and mineral water, between water from mountain springs and rivers flowing through clay layers. And even then, medicine men noticed that water that had passed through certain rocks acquired special qualities. For example, water saturated with sulfur helped with skin rashes, and iron-rich water helped with weakness and loss of strength. And when the Egyptians began to build their temples, they invariably included special pools for so-called sacred ablutions in their architecture. And these procedures were carried out not only before rituals, but also as part of treatment for chronic back pain, for insomnia, for digestive problems. And in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts in the world, dating back to approximately 1550 years before our era, there is an entire section devoted to water procedures. It describes recipes with the addition of herbs, salts, and even clay, which were mixed with water to enhance its effect. And the most amazing thing is that many of these recommendations find confirmation in modern science. For example, the description of cold compresses for fever corresponds to what we know today about the mechanisms of thermoregulation and the reduction of inflammation. And this is not a coincidence. It is the result of centuries of observation, when each generation passed on to the next not just beliefs, but practical experience gained through years of hardship. And when the Greeks adopted this knowledge, they did not just copy it, but systematized it. Hippocrates, who is rightly called the father of medicine, dedicated entire treatises to water, where he described in detail how warm water relaxes muscles, how cold water strengthens blood vessels, and how steam promotes the elimination of toxins, and even introduced contrast procedures into medical practice, the alternation of hot and cold, which today is the basis of many rehabilitation programs. And he wrote that water is not just a carrier of medicine, but the medicine itself, and that a doctor should be able to prescribe water as they prescribe a herb. And in ancient Rome, these ideas found their greatest embodiment. The baths became not just a place for hygiene, but the center of social life, where people were treated, taught, and conducted negotiations. And at the same time, in Roman baths, there already existed a clear sequence of procedures. First, a warm bath for preparation, then a hot one for opening the pores and accelerating blood flow, then a steam room, and everything ended with a cold dip in the pool, that very contrast which Hippocrates considered key for strengthening health. And what is particularly striking, the surviving Roman medical manuals specify exact time intervals for each procedure, and even recommendations on nutrition before and after. And this shows that already 2,000 years ago, people understood that water is not an element that can be used however one likes, but a force requiring respect, knowledge, and discipline. And when you step into the shower or sit in a bath today, you are continuing this ancient tradition, consciously or not. You are part of a chain that stretches from Sumerian priests to modern physiotherapists, and every drop of water on your skin carries the memory of this history. Let us jump through the centuries and find ourselves in Japan, where the tradition of onsen, that is, hot natural springs, has existed for over 1,000 years. And there, water is not just a means of hygiene, but an element of spiritual practice. And if you have ever been to a real onsen, you know that before entering the water, you are asked to wash thoroughly in a separate place, not for the sake of the pool's cleanliness, but for the sake of internal preparation, for the sake of transitioning from the external world to the internal world. And the water temperature in onsens is usually kept within 40 to 42 degrees Celsius, which at first glance seems too hot, but it is precisely at this temperature that special physiological reactions are triggered. First of all, there is a powerful expansion of peripheral vessels, which reduces the load on the heart, improves microcirculation in tissues, and simultaneously with this, the parasympathetic nervous system responsible for rest and recovery is activated. And Japanese doctors have long noticed that regular visits to onsens reduce the level of cortisol, the so-called stress hormone, and increase the concentration of oxytocin and serotonin, those very hormones that create a sense of peace and social connection. And it is interesting that in some regions of Japan, for example in Nagano Prefecture, where many volcanic springs are located, life expectancy statistics are significantly higher than the national average. And scientists have been studying for several decades how much this is related to the water habits of local residents. After all, people there do not just bathe, they do it systematically, often daily, and at a certain time of day, usually in the evening before bed, which helps to establish circadian rhythms, and the water in onsens there is often saturated with silicon, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium, elements that when penetrating through the skin have an anti-inflammatory and regenerating effect. And a recent study conducted by the University of Tokyo showed that in elderly people who visited onsens 3 times a week for 6 months, not only did sleep quality and mood improve, but joint mobility increased, the level of C-reactive protein, a marker of systemic inflammation, decreased, and even cognitive test scores improved. And this is not magic, it is physiology. It is the body's response to the stimulation it receives from water. And it is important to understand that the effect is not achieved in one go. It accumulates like a snowball. And that is why in the Japanese tradition, regularity and even ritual are so emphasized. After all, a ritual creates not just a habit, but an internal mindset when the body and mind are already preparing in advance for healing. And when you enter the hot water, you are no longer just washing yourself, you are entering into a dialogue with yourself, with nature, with the millennial wisdom contained in every drop. And now let us move to the other extreme, to the cold, to the icy waters of northern rivers, to the snow baths of Siberia, to the Scandinavian traditions of winter swimming. Because if hot water is the language of relaxation and pacification, then cold water is the language of wakefulness, activation, emergency reaction. And here, everything works differently. When your body encounters sudden cold, it immediately turns on the survival system, and the first reaction is a powerful release of adrenaline and norepinephrine, which instantly increases heart rate, dilates the bronchi, improves oxygen supply to the brain, and simultaneously with this, so-called brown fat cells are activated, a special type of fat tissue that does not store energy but burns it to produce heat. And this is not just a theory. In studies conducted in Finland and Norway, participants who practiced regular immersions in icy water showed a significant increase in insulin sensitivity, which is directly related to the prevention of type 2 diabetes. And what is even more surprising, they observed an increase in the volume of gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain responsible for decision-making, self-control, and emotional regulation. And how this happens is through short-term stress that trains the nervous system, making it more resistant to everyday irritants. Because if you can stand calmly in water at a temperature of 6 to 8 degrees for 2 to 3 minutes, then a call from the boss or a traffic jam on the road will no longer cause a panic reaction in you. And this is not just a metaphor. This is neuroplasticity in action. And it is especially important that cold therapy has a powerful anti-inflammatory effect because it reduces the activity of pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, and at the same time stimulates the production of endorphins, not those short-term ones that arise during pain, but those that persist for several hours, creating a feeling of clarity and lightness. And many athletes have long used cold baths after intense training specifically to speed up recovery. But today, scientists are increasingly talking about how even short daily cold showers for 30 to 60 seconds at the end of a regular shower can provide long-term benefits for the immune system. And one of the most significant studies in this area was conducted by Dutch scientists from LadaL University. They took 3,000 participants and for a month trained them in the technique of gradually introducing cold exposure, starting with a warm shower and ending with 30 seconds of cold water. And the results were stunning. In the group practicing cold showers, there was a 29% decrease in the number of visits to the doctor for respiratory infections. And at the same time, participants reported increased energy and improved mood. And what is especially valuable, the effect persisted even after the end of the experiment, which indicates long-term changes in the regulation of the immune response. And here it is important to understand that we are not talking about jumping into an ice hole right away. Safety and gradualness are key principles because sudden hypothermia without preparation can cause vasospasm and even arrhythmia in people with a predisposition. And therefore, modern protocols always start with short intervals and a gradual increase in load. And the most amazing thing is that in just a few weeks, the body adapts so much that it stops stops perceiving cold as a threat and begins to see it as a stimulus. And then you are not just hardening yourself, you are reprogramming your stress response at the cellular level. But water is not only temperature, it is also composition. It is minerals, gases, microelements that can penetrate the skin, affect metabolism, and even participate in the synthesis of enzymes. And here we come to one of the most amazing branches of hydrotherapy, Balneotherapy, that is treatment with natural mineral waters. And if you have traveled to resorts in the Czech Republic, Hungary, the Caucasus, or the Dead Sea, you have likely encountered procedures where water is supplied under pressure in the form of a charcoal shower, a circular shower, or underwater massage. And all this is not just a tribute to tradition, but a well-thought-out system of influence where every parameter, pressure, temperature, chemical composition, is selected individually. And here is what is interesting. Water from different sources has different properties, not because someone made it up, but because each geological formation leaves its own footprint in the water. For example, waters rich in sodium chloride, as in the Eger Basin in Hungary, have a pronounced anti-inflammatory and analgesic effect, especially in diseases of the musculoskeletal system, while hydrogen sulfide waters, such as in Piatigorsk or Masesta, stimulate microcirculation, enhance metabolic processes in tissues, and even promote the regeneration of cartilage tissue. And modern research confirms this. For example, in a clinical trial conducted in Germany, patients with osteoarthritis of the knee joint who underwent a course of hydrogen sulfide baths showed a significant improvement in mobility and a reduction in pain syndrome compared to the control group, and the effect persisted for 3 months after the end of the course. And what is especially important, mineral waters act not only locally, but also systemically, because active components are absorbed through the skin and enter the bloodstream. And for example, magnesium, which is contained in many thermal waters, plays a key role in more than 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including the regulation of blood pressure, the transmission of nerve impulses, and DNA synthesis. And if you have a chronic magnesium deficiency, and it is observed in a third of the population of developed countries, then even short-term immersion in magnesium water can have a noticeable effect on anxiety levels and sleep quality. And there are even studies where they measured the concentration of magnesium in red blood cells before and after a course of baths, and the difference was statistically significant. And this opens up a completely new perspective. Hydrotherapy as a method of correcting micronutrient status, not through pills, but through the skin, through a natural barrier that is also activated by the procedure itself, because warm or contrast water improves the permeability of the epidermis. And then water becomes not just an environment, but a conductor, delivering to the body what it lacks. And then it becomes clear why in some cultures special rituals existed. For example, in Tibet, monks drank water only from certain sources at certain times of the year, believing that it carried the energy of the mountains. And modern science, although it doesn't speak of energy, confirms that the composition of water indeed changes depending on the season, on the melting of snow, on solar activity. Maybe the ancients were right. It is just that their language was different, and today, when we can analyze water with the precision of a microgram, we begin to understand that their intuition was surprisingly accurate. And perhaps the greatest gift that hydrotherapy can give us is not only physical health, but the return to a sense of connection with nature, with the body, with oneself. Because when you are standing under the shower, you cannot simultaneously check your mail, answer messages, or plan tomorrow. You are simply present. You feel, you breathe, and in this presence is the key to everything else. And here we come to the most important thing, how to turn all this knowledge into daily practice. Because one of the most common mistakes is either a complete rejection of hydrotherapy as something too complicated or requiring special conditions, or, on the contrary, a fanatical following of someone else's protocols without taking into account individual characteristics. And the truth is that one can start with the simplest thing, with a conscious shower lasting not 5 minutes, but 10, where the first 3 minutes are warm water for relaxation, then 2 minutes are a bit cooler to activate blood flow, and the last half minute is cold to fix the effect. And do this every day, and in 2 weeks, you will notice how your morning awakening has changed. You will not feel that heaviness with which you used to get out of bed, because cold stimulation triggers a release of norepinephrine, which cheers you up more gently and sustainably than caffeine, and does not cause a subsequent collapse of energy. And if you have a bath, start with a simple salt bath. Regular sea salt without fragrances, 2 cups for a full bath, temperature about 38 degrees, and 15 minutes. This is enough to relieve muscle tension, improve sleep quality, and even reduce stress levels, because sodium and magnesium, through the skin, act on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that very system that manages the response to stress. And over time, when you feel you are ready, you can add contrast. After a warm bath, a short rinse with cool water, and you will immediately feel how the body becomes lighter, as if it has been rebooted. And the most important thing is not to chase records, not to strive for maximum duration or temperature, because the effect depends not on intensity, but on regularity and awareness. And if today you did only 30 seconds of a cold shower, this is already a victory, because you gave the body a signal. You are capable of adapting, and each time this signal will grow stronger, and you will notice how not only the body changes, but also the attitude towards difficulties. They will stop seeming insurmountable, because you have already proved to yourself that you are capable of enduring discomfort for a greater good. And this is the most valuable thing that hydrotherapy gives. It teaches us to trust ourselves, our resources, our ability to recover, and in a world where everything is arranged so that we feel fragile, dependent, in need of constant support from the outside, such a practice becomes an act of internal freedom, because water is not a commodity, not a service, not a privilege of the rich. It is an element available to any person on the planet, and even if you do not have a bath, even if you only have a tap and a shower head, you still possess a powerful tool for self-care. And perhaps that is why hydrotherapy is experiencing such a surge of interest today, not because it is fashionable, but because we are finally beginning to understand that health is not a list of symptoms and diagnoses, but a state of balance, and water is one of the oldest and most reliable ways to restore it. And the next time you turn on the water, stop for a second, feel its temperature, listen to its sound, breathe in the steam, and remember that you are not just washing, you are continuing a millennial tradition of healing, and every drop flowing down your skin carries in itself the potential for transformation. And this is not poetry, it is biology, it is physics, it is chemistry, it is your right to be born in water, to live in water, and to be healed by water. And now that you know how it works, only one thing remains: to start. Not tomorrow, not on Monday, not after vacation, but today, right now, because your body is already waiting for this signal. Your nervous system is already ready for retuning. Your immunity is already waiting for support. And all that is needed is to open the tap, take a breath, and allow yourself to enter the flow, in which not only water flows, but also time, experience, wisdom, and hope. And let each of your water rituals become a small act of faith in yourself, in nature, in the possibility of healing, because water never stops flowing, even when it seems that everything has frozen. It looks for a way, it finds cracks, it penetrates deep, it brings back life. And you are part of this flow, and your healing has already begun. You only need to take the first step, into the water, into trust, into yourself.